So here's what happened after I had Canaan. I had her in 1991, so I know some of you may remember 1991 like I do. There were no computers. There was no Amazon. There was no internet for you to look up things about what you were going through. And so I went to every library that was within, any distance of me. I went to every bookstore, every Christian bookstore. Excuse me, I don't remember if we even had a Walmart in our area that had books. I don't think we did. We do now, but we didn't then. But there was nothing. And what I just kept feeling like is I wanted to hear someone's story. I wanted to read someone's story that could tell me, excuse me, that I was going to survive, that I was going to survive with hope and with my faith intact, with my marriage intact. I mean, that's very difficult on a marriage. Husbands and wives don't grieve the same way. My husband was very quiet in his grief, and you'll read a little bit about that in the book. Even though he wasn't quiet, he's not very quiet at all, is he, Deanna? He's not a quiet person, but he grieved more internally, and I needed to talk about it to other people. I needed to, have someone talk to me about, excuse me, I had just had a baby. I had gone through 9 months of carrying a baby, and I had gone through labor and delivery. And, we ladies talk about our labor and delivery. We talk about having that baby. I needed to be normal and talk about that. I just had a baby, but I came home with empty arms. And so I just longed for someone else to share their story and give me hope. There was nothing. And so I sat down at an electric typewriter. Y'all remember those? What I typed all my college papers on. And I typed a manuscript that you see in that picture, and it's back there on the table. I only have one copy, but I typed it, and I took it to my local printers, and I had him make me 50 copies. And that I just got cardstock that was kind of pink, that mauve color, and I drew that little sketch on the front. She had a blanket. I bought a blanket, and I had her name put on it before she was born, before I knew anything was going to happen. And I wanted white lace sewn around the outside of the little blanket. And my mother sat during my labor and those 3 days and hand sewed that lace on the outside of that blanket. And so I put it over the side of her crib and a little teddy bear that I'd received, and I drew that, just a little sketch. And so that was my book. And my doctor, the reason I had 50 copies made was my doctor had requested 25 to keep in his office because he wanted something that he could hand out. He told me to write my name or put a card in the front of it. He said, I want something that if someone needs to talk to somebody, they can come to you and they'll know how to get a hold of you. And so I did that, gave him 25. I gave 24 copies out, well, really 23 copies out to family and friends who were a part of the book in some way. And I kept 2 copies. And over the years, I would continuously give out that other copy, but I kept that one copy in our fireproof safe because, like I said, there was no digital copy. I had one paper copy. If something happened to it, that's all I had. And so for 30 years, that one copy, the other copy that I had been given out so many times, eventually it just didn't come back. But I would get emails, phone calls, letters, you name it, from someone who had read my book in Ohio, and I was living in Tennessee, and needed it for someone else because someone that they knew had just had a stillbirth, and they desperately needed a copy of my book that they had read 30 years before. And every single time, I would weigh it out. Do I get that copy out of the safe? And, do I give it to them? And the answer was always, I can't. I can't, but I know they need it, and I had so much guilt. And so the last 4 years, God started to deal with me and say, get it out of the safe. We have, printers now. We have copiers. We have computers. Type it in, edit it, get that book back out there, get it published. And I couldn't, because when you write your own words, you have to live it again. If I was going to read that book again, it was going to take me right back there. And I just had this feeling that I would just sink into depression. I was scared. And finally one night I just said, Lord, I'm not obeying you. And if you want me to get it published, I will do it. You're just going to have to help me because I can't read it without sinking into depression. And I know this sounds crazy, but I stayed up one night, all night, reading and editing the book. I didn't edit very much because I didn't even remember what I wrote. And I was thinking, wow, this is okay. I don't have to change this a lot. I don't even remember this. And after I got through it, I really even didn't remember what I just edited, honestly. It was like God protected me and just put a hedge around me to read it and get all the way through it. And I got done, and I thought, well, now what do I do? And so I thought I'll write an epilogue because a lot of things have happened that are not in the book from her life. And as I started to write that epilogue, God brought things to mind that I hadn't thought about in years. And so my husband and I sat down and we started talking about all the ways that Canaan, though she didn't even take one breath of life, had touched so many lives and impacted so many. And we started saying she had her own little ministry, even though she's not here. She just had her own little ministry. And so I wrote the epilogue. And in the back, so many of you today have had some time with me. This is my favorite part of ever speaking. You've shared your stories. So many of us have had miscarriages. It's very common. You saw the statistics on that slide that I had Matt put up at the beginning. It's very common. Stillbirth is not as common, but it's 1 in 100. Can you believe 1 in 100 ladies have stillbirth? Stillbirth is anything after 5 months or 20 weeks. That's considered a stillbirth. If it's prior to that, it's a miscarriage. And so many of you have told me your stories, and how God's brought you through some things like I've gone through. And that means so much to me. But there's so many who need us to share our stories. That's a lot of times that's our purpose. When we go through something, God didn't cause that to happen necessarily, but He can take what happens. If you share it with someone else who's going through the same thing, He can use your tragedies and your trials for good. And so that's what we feel like Canaan has done for us. So after I had the book published, the copy that you'll get today, I went back for my very first book signing to Ohio, where we grew up. And the man in the blue shirt is Dr. Lopez. I had not seen him in almost 30 years. And he came to the book signing, and he stayed for the whole 3 hours. He signed books right with me if someone asked him to. But we had a wonderful reunion there. He became a Christian because of Canaan. So just a few months after I had her, he shared with me that he had accepted Christ, and it was because of our testimonies and the faith that we had during that time. He also had a nurse in his office who had cancer, and she was a Christian. I grew up with her, and she had been such a testimony to him. He said, I'd never seen faith like that, you and Rick and her. And he said, I just knew that I needed that kind of faith. So when I went back, by a year, he had gotten his own office because the other doctor that he was in was not a Christian and performed abortions, and he didn't want any part of that once he got saved. And he had his own office. Every single thing in there was Christian literature's on the tables. Did you go to him, Deanna? Yeah. Yes, you remember that change? Yeah. Christian music playing over the speaker while you waited in the waiting room. I mean, such a difference, complete turnaround. But he told me again when he came and we reunited, he said, I wouldn't be the person I am today if it wasn't for your baby. So you can change the slide, Matt. This is Sherry. Sorry, my nurse, and I had not seen her since that day. And she came to the book signing as well, and I got to thank her for the first time, and now I know her last name. It's Sherry Timberlake. And we hugged and cried for quite a while that day because she said, I didn't know what to say to you. I had no idea. I was young. I'd only been nursing for a year, and I'd never gone through anything like that. She said, I was just praying, God help me, God help me, God help me. And I said, you did everything right. You said everything right, and that meant a lot to her. So Sherry and I have stayed in touch ever since. We talk almost every day. She either texts me or we message through Facebook. But her son is a minister now. He's the pastor of Sand Hill Christian Baptist. And he wanted a book. She was telling him about the book. And so now he uses it in his ministry because he has women that go through pregnancy loss and he knows what to do. So that's Sherry. You can go next slide, Matt. This is my brother, and he's given me permission to tell his story. So when I had Canaan, our family was kind of having a crisis, and so they were going through a divorce. But when everything happened with us, he drove down with my sister, and then my sister-in-law drove down later with her kids so that they could be a part of everything in the funeral. And so my brother got saved. Remember, he didn't want to go to church ever, and he hadn't gone to church. He got a full ride basketball scholarship to a college in Michigan. It happened to be a Christian college where he continued to hear the word but not be saved. He married the president of the college's daughter. And so my sister-in-law was a Christian, a very devout Christian, wonderful, sweetest person in the world. And he had done all these things to her. We were on her side because she always kept her faith, But we understood, she'd had enough. And we understood that, He had broken his marriage vows, and we understood her place. Well, he got saved after Canaan. And for 7 years, he tried to prove to her that he meant it, because she didn't trust him. He'd lied a lot. And so he made restitution for all the financial decisions that he had made and the people that he had hurt. He continually was a great father to his kids, did everything he could do to show her that he really got saved and turned his life around. In 7 years, just like Jacob and Leah, I had prayed every single morning. I pray a lot in the shower. I know that's crazy, but I started doing it when I was pregnant with Canaan, when I knew about Canaan, because everybody was around me, and they were looking at me and just waiting for me to cry. Like if I shed one tear, they were right at my side. Oh, are you okay? And I didn't want that. I wanted to be able to just grieve. And so I found out I could grieve in the shower because I could cry in there, and the water would wash away my tears. And I could come out of the shower and nobody knew I'd been in there crying. And so every morning when I got ready for school, I would pray for my brother, Gary, and his wife, Danette, to get back together, for God to heal their marriage, because now he was a Christian and she was a Christian. And guess what? In 7 years of being divorced, what a miracle. He asked her for a date, and she finally said yes. And they went out, and 4 months later, they got remarried. And to this day, that picture was just taken 2 weekends ago when we were at their house, and they're like newlyweds all the time, y'all. I mean, they got remarried in 1998 after 7 years of being divorced, but they don't tell anybody about, people don't know them, they don't even count that 7 years of being apart, because they were still together for the kids, not living together, but going to games together and doing everything for the kids. And so they still claim they got married a year after us, 41 years. They celebrate on that anniversary, not the May anniversary. They celebrate in August on their official, first wedding date, and don't even act like that 7 years happened, because it's under the blood. So that's another miracle because of Canaan. Because he got saved because of her. We can go to the next slide, Matt. Now, I left out a part of the story on purpose. Do you all remember the second pregnancy and the mass? Now I can tell you that for 4 weeks, I had to wait after the doctor had told me everything. He said, you're going to come back for an ultrasound. And back then, it was 1982. They did not do ultrasounds. You didn't find out the sex of your baby. They only did an ultrasound for something that was wrong. So he had me come back, and he was going to have specialists in, and they were going to decide what to do with this mass. Well, the night before we went to the doctor's appointment, I told my husband, I said, I know and I believe that God could speak one word, and in a second that mass could be gone. I know that and I believe that. But I also know that God doesn't heal everyone, because sometimes we have to go through things to be able to give him the glory, but even if he doesn't. And so my husband said, well, that's how we'll pray. Even if he doesn't, we need strength to go through this, because we've already lost one baby. And now, you may be facing treatment. We're going to lose this baby. Even if he doesn't, we're going to stand for him. We're going to sing for him. We're going to serve him. We went the next day, and they did the ultrasound. And there was a little baby bouncing around on that ultrasound. and there was absolutely no mess. And so that's my son Micah on the controls. We had a studio at the time. That's him at 6 months, and then that's him singing Deanna's favorite song. She said, I'm going to talk about Micah singing, I got the devil by the tail in your intro. And I said, no, that's a spoiler. So that's him as a little boy singing, I've got the devil by the tail. And he is now a professional drummer in Nashville. He moved to Nashville first because have any of you ever heard of Jason Crabb or the Crabb family? Okay, he was the drummer for the Crabb family and still played for Jason up until February. He played for Jason off and on. And so if you go to the next page, there he is with the Crabb family playing on the Grand Ole Opry. He's a pretty famous drummer in Nashville, but he's always played Christian music. So you can go to the next slide, Matt. And now he plays country music, but there's a reason. He plays for Diamond Rio. Any of you heard Diamond Rio? He's the drummer for Diamond Rio now. I don't know if you all listened a lot to their lyrics, but did you notice anything about their lyrics when you listened to them? Did you hear anything about cheating or drinking or partying or anything that's country music's about now? You know why you didn't? Those boys are Christians. In the middle of their set, they have a part where they talk about they're all believers in Christ, and they put Christ first, God first in their lives, second, family, and third, their country. And they sing a song called In God We Still Trust. And I don't know if any of you have heard that, but they give their testimonies. And Micah rides a bus with them. He's subbed for Brian Prout, who used to be the drummer. He subbed for him since he was in his early 20s when Brian would have to be off the road. And so when Brian retired in January, they came to Micah and said, we can't think of anyone we'd rather be on the bus with who knows our songs, because they were the only country group that I let Micah listen to when he was little, because their lyrics had Christian lyrics in them. If you listen to songs like Mama, Don't Forget to Pray for Me, Sawmill Road, God Had a Better Plan, He Had a Better Plan. That's about God having a better plan. They have a lot of songs that were Christian. And the other night, we were in the green room with Marty Road, the lead singer, and he said, so you're the mama that wouldn't let your son listen to any country music except for ours because of our lyrics? And I said, that's right. And he said, you know why our lyrics said that? And I said, well, I know now that you all are Christians. And he said, well, we were all brought up in church. And he said, every time Arista Records would present a song for us, we'd say, man, that sounds like a hit. And they'd go, yeah, let's go record it. And they'd say, for somebody else, not us. And they'd say, why? It's a great song. Yeah, it is, but I have to deal with my parents. And if I sing that, they are not going to like it. That is not who we are. And so that's why I now know why they were so protective of their lyrics. You won't hear anything bad in their songs. And you'll hear a lot. If you listen to Sawmill Road, it has a great Christian message. There are a lot of their songs. I could list them, my favorites. And then they did a whole gospel album that's called The Reason. The first song is titled The Reason, and that's a great song. The reason why I'm standing here is because of God is what the song's about. So he's on the road with them right now in North or South Dakota, and continues to play. His name's Micah, and it means loved of God. Next slide. And so Micah has given us 2 grandchildren. And so that's Bruce, the little redhead. His name's, you can go to the next slide, Matt, if you don't care, because that's Bruce. His name is Bruce Wayne Schweinsburg. So you all know who Bruce Wayne is, right? My son is a Batman fanatic, but there are a lot of Bruces in our family and pastors that we have been so close to over the years named Bruce, of all things. My college pastor was named Bruce. And then my brother's middle name is Wayne, and Jackie, my daughter-in-law's dad and her grandfather are both middle names Wayne. So they try to tell everyone it's a family name, but we know. You all know, right? Bruce Wayne. But he's a little redhead, and you all saw the picture of my dad, but his hair was already a little bit gray, but my dad was a redhead. And so we joke a lot that my dad was up in heaven when he was getting ready to be born, and he said, make sure he's a redhead so they don't forget me down there. And then the next one, that was just for fun. So your son probably looks like that, my son, and then my grandson. And the next slide, and this is Janet Summer, named after her aunt. And, sorry, my daughter-in-law is just the best. If you all have children and they're not married yet, pray. Pray for their spouse. We prayed for Jackie before we ever knew Jackie. We prayed that Micah would find a godly woman that loved God with all her heart and pursued God. Jackie's parents also sang Southern gospel music. If you've ever heard of the Christ family, Jackie sang a lot of the leads that you've heard on the radio. She was a professional singer. And they got together, and when they first got married, they were going on 2 different tour buses, he with the Crabb family and her with the Christ family, going 2 different directions. And when they got married, they said, we can't do this. Somebody's got to be home. And so she sang for a while, and he stayed home and did session work and things like that. And then she came off the road, and now he went back on the road. But Janet Summer, when she was born, my daughter-in-law wanted me in the room because they knew it was a girl. And she had already asked me ahead of time, would it be okay if we honored Canaan by naming her after her? And I said, of course. And so little Jane is my girl. Pappy tries to steal her all the time, and she will tell him, Pappy, I love you, but I'm Mammy's girl. And it means so much because I get to see a little girl grow up for the first time, because I had a son and 3 nephews, and I had a niece that was in Michigan that I hardly ever saw, my brother's little girl. So this is the first time I've got to see Disney princess movies and dress up, and she was getting her pedicure there at the last picture, and that's me watching over it. But she's a doll, and she's just a sweetheart. Bruce has already accepted Christ at the age of 6, and she told us the other night that she wanted Jesus in her heart too. We're not sure if she understands yet, but we told her we pray with her, and so they are being taught in church and growing up in church and hearing Bible stories from me constantly being read to. And so I have a lot of joy in my life, and you can see that, and I don't know what's on the next slide, Matt, but we can go there. So, I'm sorry that I made y'all cry so much the first half, but as you can see, God did a lot, and there are so many miraculous stories, that even more that are in the book. I was telling Deanna, she read the book but didn't remember one that's in the epilogue about how God worked. I mean, so many. 3 of my nurses were saved besides my doctor. We gave an invitation at the funeral. We treated it like a church service and gave an invitation. There were 11 people saved at the funeral. My sister's mother-in-law was saved at the funeral, and she was one of my nurses as well. So many. Those 25 copies that my doctor gave out, I've had so many women call me, and I've prayed with them over the phone to accept Christ after they read the book. And now, since it's published, even more so. I recently got an email from someone in Denmark. I don't know if I've shared this with you. And she had gone online on Amazon, and there's an ebook on there as well. And you can preview the first chapter on the ebook. And so she contacted me, and she said, is that whole book about God? Because I really don't believe in him, and I don't want to read something that the whole book's about God. And I was praying and thinking, what do I say? And so I wrote her back, and I said, I got to be honest with you. Yes, the whole book is about God because he means everything to me. And had I not had God in my life, I could have never made it through this. And she started telling me her story, and she has a little girl, but she just recently had a little girl full-term stillborn, and she kept talking to me, and she said, can I ask you questions? I sent her the book to Denmark. I said, if I send it to you, will you read it anyway, even though it's about God? And she said, yes. I said, after you read it, will you keep in touch with me? And she said, yes. So she sends me emails periodically with tons of questions. Y'all, I have to pray hard because, when you're dealing with someone that doesn't believe in God at all, you can't use the Bible because they don't believe the Bible, So you have to think how you can approach things. Well, she now believes in God. She hasn't accepted Christ yet, but she believes in God now because she believes that her grandmother was a Christian. She now believes because I told her the story about how I see my father holding my daughter in heaven. I think about that, gives me peace. She said she now sees her grandmother holding her daughter, and she believes and she thinks she might want to go there someday. So you all pray for her. Her name's Vera, but that's just one of the many stories, many, many. And so First of all, when you have those moments, but even if he doesn't, always go with God. It's worth it. Secondly, you all have been telling me your stories. If you have a story to tell, even if it's hard, don't keep that in, because there's someone somewhere that needs to hear your story and needs to hear your moment of saying, even if he doesn't, and then what God's done for you from that. And so thank you again for having me. Read the book. It's got a lot more uplifting things in there. And so you'll cry some, but you won't cry all the time. Some tears will be of joy. So thank you for letting me come and minister. I'm grateful. You all are awesome. Everyone that I've talked to is so sweet, and I'm loving hearing your stories. I'll be around for a while if you want me to sign your book or you want to talk to me. I'll go back to the table, Deanna, if that's okay. And so we can just have a time of fellowship there. Thank you.